I think it's a very interesting development. Clearly, there are a lot of people beginning to invest in Africa for a whole range of sound business reasons. And the group has, I think, already got Millicom, MTN, and is it Rocket Internet, who are sort of working very closely with it. So it's beginning to attract quite a lot of investment and interest, both locally within Africa, but also overseas. So maybe other large global corporates will take more notice now that they've invested.
Well, what has changed? Because for so many years, global investors really ignored the continent. Why are they paying attention to Africa now?
I think there are a range of reasons. The most obvious one is just the size of the continent. If you think of it, sort of 1.111 billion people, and that's an awful lot of people. Secondly, I think there is growing stability in some of the countries. One of the big things to think about Africa, though, is it's a huge continent, and it's got enormous diversity within it. And it's actually a very rich continent. People like to think that Africa's poor. It has great human capacity. It has richness in its ecology and its environment. So it is a place of huge potential. And I think another factor that's really important is that people are beginning to look and recognize the need for longer-term investment. I'm not quite as supportive as some people who see there's a lot of short-term returns. But if people are willing to invest in the medium term, Africa really has to be seen as a good place. It's got a young population that is going to grow. And also it's now got the sort of infrastructure increasingly in place. And that's particularly the case with internet. But you've got to remember that huge parts of the continent aren't yet connected. So there is a danger that we're going to get this investment leading to much greater inequalities in the continent than exist at the present time.
Well, speaking about inequalities, I mean, we do see that some countries certainly are attracting more investment than others. Kenya tops the list, as does Nigeria. Why are those countries sort of the golden children right now of Africa when it comes to foreign investment?
Well, people like to think that the governments and the people are doing things right there. But if you to plot a map of size of population against the amount of investment going in, they're very, very similar. So I think one of the key things is that actually these are large countries. Nigeria's got about 185 million people. Kenya's now about 45 million. And you look at other countries, Egypt and South Africa. Egypt's around 90 million, South Africa around 55. So these are actually quite large markets. You add into that growing stability in most of those. And then you also look at the exception. I mean, the Democratic Republic of Congo is a large country, 77 million or so, but it's not exactly stable. And so you're not getting as much investment there, although there are people who are beginning to look at that as an investment target as well. So I think the sheer size is important. You look at attempts to improve stability. Certainly the change of government in Nigeria promises further changes. Let's see if they roll out. But the companies I'm speaking to looking at investment are really focusing particularly on the size of the market and its potential growth.
Now, speaking of infrastructure, how extensive is the investment infrastructure in Africa right now? I mean, is there an active venture capital group there that's helping young entrepreneurs getting in touch with investors like we see in Silicon Valley? Obviously not as big, but is there much of a relationship between VCs and entrepreneurs right now?
Undoubtedly, but in terms of the physical infrastructure, it varies hugely across the continent. You've got some countries that are becoming much, much better connected. You look at the 4G rollout in Rwanda, for example, but then you contrast that with countries such as Sierra Leone, for example, which has less than 5% internet connectivity. So again, I come back to that critical point about diversity, and again, we have to think this is long term. And we have to identify people who are really willing to make that commitment over a considerable period, 5 to 10 years, rather than trying to get their returns in 2 or 3 years.